And welcome in, UCF fans. We are ready for Space Week and ready for liftoff as Arizona is this year's opponent to face the Citronauts. And to talk about the Wildcats, we bring in Justin Spears from the Arizona Daily Star down in Tucson. Justin, how you doing?
Doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Happy to have you. Yeah, we're here to learn about Arizona, one of the four newcomers to the Big 12 from the Pac 12. And a lot to talk about with them. I think the thing that stands out to me in the age of the transfer portal, when you see athletes committed perhaps more to coaches than they are to schools, that Brent Brennan takes over and was able to keep so many key players for this Arizona roster. So, what's been his message, and how was he able to accomplish this in keeping so many of the top guys and potential NFL level talent on this Wildcats team?
I think it says a lot about a guy that he's able to come in and in just a couple of days really sell the program and what this year could mean for Arizona. And, Brent Brennan is a very genuine guy. He looks you in the eye. Players want to play for him. You look back at his time at San Jose State and the way that the guys created the culture, it was really impressive. And, people are going to look at Brent Brennan and his record at San Jose State and be like, well, he's got a losing record. That doesn't necessarily bode well for Arizona. And I have to remind people that it is so hard to win at a program like San Jose State. It is so hard to recruit really good players to San Jose. And I think for him to win 7 games in back-to-back years says a lot about the kind of coach that Brent Brennan is. San Jose State is one of the more challenging programs to win at on a consistent basis in college football. That's just a fact. And I think he's had a lot of great success in his time at San Jose State. And not only is he a good coach, but he's just a good human being. And he's a guy that you really want to play for. And the players felt that. He's always had an open door policy with these guys, and they were able to get to know him in just a short amount of time. And then as Noah Fifita and Tetairoa McMillan and Jonas Savinea and Jacob Manu and all these other players, while they were deciding what they wanted to do after this upcoming season, they all kind of realized, like, yes, we did sign to play for Jed Fish, but we also all came together. And the reason why we had so much success last year is because of the players. And Noah Fifita and T-Mac held a player-only meeting, and they were the catalysts of that room. And they were able to galvanize all of the players to stay at Arizona. And like you said, in this transfer portal era, the NIL era, it's they were in a very vulnerable spot, and they were getting, approached by schools. You'd hear about these offers that they were facing, and Noah Fifita and Tetairoa McMillan were facing millions of dollars in NIL money to go somewhere else to play for a much higher profile school than, say, Arizona. But they decided to stay and finish what they started at Arizona and see everything through. And to me, I think it says a lot about those guys and their character. And I think it says a lot about Brent Brennan because, these guys could have easily played for anybody else, but they decided to stay here and play for Brent Brennan. And one more thing I'll add to that is they kind of took Jed Fish's advice at the end of the Alamo Bowl after Arizona beat Oklahoma. Jed Fish was asked by me about, how does this set yourself up for next year? How does this set up Arizona for the 2024 season? And Jed Fish was honest and said, I know people would probably love to go chase the NIL money somewhere else, but, this is going to be a top 10 team next year. Why wouldn't I want to be a part of that? And then Jed Fish then leaves to go take the head coaching job at Washington. And the players are like, yeah, you know what? We have something special down here. We don't necessarily need Jed Fish. And the way that they were able to stay together, galvanize the players, the city of Tucson, what this upcoming season is going to mean for Arizona, it could set up Brent Brennan for the rest of his career. And he's got guys like Noah Fifita and T-Mac to thank.
Yeah, I think, those that kind of know the situation and know, the history of San Jose State realize that, for anyone to lead them to bowl games and, consecutive seasons and make them a consistent winner, that is not an easy task to do. They were, consistently a team that was down near the bottom of the Mountain West, and I think the WAC before that. Brent Brennan comes in with a pretty good pedigree, and obviously with a terrific roster to work with. It's also a team that finished the year really well. They're picked to finish fifth in the Big 12 media poll. They're one of the only 5 teams that got a first place vote out of it. They won 7 games in a row to conclude last season, including 5 wins against ranked opponents. Do you think they carry it over? Was there anything, maybe more under the hood that is a little bit alarming under the surface level, or do you think this is a team that just, could potentially pick right up where it left off last year?
Yeah, there's still some question marks with this year's team. And, Jed Fish was still the coach, and the players that left decided to stay. I mean, we're talking about Bill Norton on the defensive line, who went to Texas. Ephesians Prysock, the cornerback, who went to Washington. Running back Jonah Coleman also went to Washington as well. There were some key pieces that left the program where if Jed Fish and those guys were able to stay, then we'd be talking about Arizona being a bona fide top 15, maybe even a top 10 team. But that's not the case. They had some players leave. They're replacing all starters on the defensive line. They lost 9 scholarship defensive linemen from last season. And that was one of the biggest points of emphasis for Arizona last year, going from 22 to 23, because their rushing defense was just so awful in 2022. There were 1, 2, maybe even 3 games that Arizona could have won if they had just stopped the run. And so they went out and got a bunch of defensive linemen, a bunch of 300-pounders, guys who can consume blockers and take up space. And those guys were so important in their turnaround. And they went from one of the worst rushing defenses in college football to top 30, I believe. So you're losing those guys, whether they're going into the NFL or transferring after the departure of Jed Fish. So Brent Brennan and his staff, they decided to go after 7 scholarship players on the defensive line. They've added some newcomers. So the defensive line is going to have a whole new look. They have a different system, a different scheme. They're going to be playing more aggressive on the defensive line, whereas the previous regime, it was more gap sound, just stay at the line of scrimmage and don't give up the big plays. The defensive line mentality now is just completely different at Arizona. So with the new mentality, with the new players that they have, I'm really curious to see how that works for Arizona, because, if Arizona doesn't have a good defensive line and these guys are getting pushed back, then you're affecting guys like Jacob Manu, some other defensive backs that are really effective for the Wildcats. So defensive line, I think, is going to be so important. And the offensive line too. Losing left tackle Jordan Morgan is huge. And Arizona has a guy by the name of Rhino Tapatoatai, who's probably going to start at left tackle. He doesn't have any collegiate experience whatsoever. Big Jordan Morgan went from 2,400 snaps. Sorry, as my dog plays with a squeaky toy here. Take that toy away from them. But Jordan had like 2,200 snaps. Rhino doesn't have any snaps. Now, Big Jonas Avinea is really good at right tackle. He's going to be a first-round pick. I think he's one of the best offensive linemen in football. But, it takes a unit to protect Noah Fifita and all the other assets that Arizona has. If they can't protect those guys, and if the defensive line can't replicate something similar to what they did last year, then all the hype and everything that Arizona has generated isn't going to mean much. I know it's cliche talking about the trench battle, but I think Arizona's success this season all falls on what the offensive and defensive line can do.
So it kind of leads me to another point here. Dino Babers is now the offensive coordinator. There was one criticism of Babers that I, from what I kind of gathered about his time at Syracuse, it was pass protection. It was a relatively high number of sacks that Syracuse would give up, and I know Fifita is not exactly the biggest guy. So, what is this offensive identity going to look like with Babers? How does it compare to what Jed Fish was doing last season, and do you kind of see them still being as potent as they were at times last season?
Yeah, I think they're still going to be very potent, just because you still have T-Mac on the outside, who's one of the best, if not the best receiver in college football. Noah Fifita and that connection that he has with him. I mean, that's a connection that goes all the way back to their middle school days. They played Pop Warner together for the Orange County Buckeyes. They played high school together. Now here they are at Arizona. They have a connection that not really anybody in college football has. But the other guys getting involved, that's going to be something, worth watching, because now the jig is up for T-Mac. Everyone knows how good of a receiver he is. And I think that, defenses are going to be, double teaming him, triple teaming, doing whatever they can to limit him. But, why T-Mac was so successful last year was because he had a really good slot receiver in Jacob Cowing, who's now playing for the San Francisco 49ers. So you're going to have to replace Jacob Cowing. You're going to have to replace tight end Tanner McLaughlin, who's playing for the Cincinnati Bengals. He is the most productive tight end Arizona's had since Rob Gronkowski, which is a very big deal. And so, those other guys getting him involved, that's going to be super important. And I think that this is going to be something similar to what Jetfish ran last year, but it's also going to be something that Brent Brennan did at San Jose State. It's going to be something that Dino Babers did at Syracuse and Eastern Illinois and all the other stops that he's had along the way. It's going to be like a potpourri of these offensive concepts, because Brent Brennan understands, okay, these players are so good. Let's figure out what worked for them last year. And so the coaches, they're not like, hey, this is our system. You got to figure out how to run it. They're actually leaning more towards the players, and they're asking them and picking their brains. And they're wondering what worked last year. What is something that you think should be a staple of our offense? So you're kind of getting this, like, all this offensive minds just kind of molding together. And so I think it's going to be really a combination of everything. But one thing that I have noticed in training camp so far is Arizona's going to run a lot of 12 personnel this year. They're going to use the 2 tight end sets. They have a really good one in Roberto Miranda, who's more used as a run blocking tight end last year. He's going to have an elevated role in the passing game, but he's a really good blocker. Kean Burnett, who came from Servite High School, where Noah Fifita and T-Mac played, he's going to have a bigger role in the offense now that Tanner McLaughlin is no longer there. And they have some other guys that are in the wings too, but I've noticed they're using quite a bit of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, which is something that you see at like North Dakota State or Oregon State, teams that are all about being gritty and running downhill and blocking and running the football. So that's going to be something that's a little bit different about Arizona. And they're going to be versatile. They're going to throw a number of packages at you. They're going to go under center. They're going to go and gun. They're going to flex you out. They're going to use 2 tight ends. It's going to be a very interesting playbook for Arizona this year.
Yeah, you really do see a lot of teams starting to trend more towards 12. Just based on kind of the way the games are working and trying to create matchups up the seam and adding an extra blocker if you can in the run game, right? So, I mean, I know UCF did that quite a bit last year, and they'll do it again this year. They've got their base will be 11, but they're going to run plenty of 12 stuff as well. We've touched on them a little bit. I'd like to spend a little bit more detail about Noah Fifita, Tetairoa, McMillan. These are 2 really top-level players in the Pac-12 last year. McMillan's a projected high first-round draft pick. So, what makes these guys so special? And if you've kind of gotten any sense from talking to other coaches or even Arizona's coaches, what are they saying about these players that obviously UCF are going to have to game plan for in November?
Noah Fifita is a leader of men, and you got that when he led Arizona out onto the court at McHale Center to announce to the basketball crowd that they're staying at the U of A. I think that is, to me, one of the more captivating moments in my time covering Arizona. So there was so much uncertainty about what was happening with Noah and T-Mac. And during the first media timeout at an Arizona UCLA basketball game, which is Brent Brennan's alma mater, UCLA, and they're playing, it's the last game between these 2 schools as Pac-12 opponents. So it was a very big deal. Like that afternoon, there was a lot of history going down there. But then after the first media timeout, the lights cut out at McHale Center, and they put on a video on the video board, and they talked about togetherness, family, and then, hey, Tucson, we're running it back. No Fifita, T-Mac, the entire Arizona football team, they run out on the court, and the crowd just went nuts. And you could kind of sense that Arizona fans were just like, whew, okay, we're not going to stink next year. Like, we're actually going to have a team that we're really excited about, because a lot of people thought, Brent Brennan coming in, these guys are all going to follow Jed Fish to Washington, and it's just going to be a total rebuild this upcoming season. But those guys gave Arizona fans, people in the city of Tucson, a lot of hope about this upcoming season. And going into that announcement and them going out onto the court, Brent Brennan was in the back. He just wanted, it was like, hey, this is the players deal. This is your guys' thing. I'm just here to support you guys. And Noah Fifita was like, no, man, like, we want to show everyone that we're with you, that we're going to lock arms and we're going to go side by side. Like, we're here for you. And for Noah to have that maturity to, champion their coach, their new coach, and show that they're all in on this new guy, it says a lot about their maturity. And, I've gathered that, Noah Fifita is kind of like Russell Wilson in a lot of ways. Maybe not as corny as Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson can be a little bit corny, but Noah Fifita is just such a mature guy who studies his craft, is just the ultimate gym rat, and is so mature for his age. And so he's a great leader. People can talk about the size all they want, but he's been small his entire life and has known how to be able to use it. And he's played at the highest level, both in high school and now at college. So I really like Noah Fifita as a quarterback. I think he is a great leader. And, Tetairoa McMillan is the guy that has really helped out Noah along the way, has gotten him that exposure. In Arizona, seeing Noah, after recruiting T-Mac, they realized, you know what, this guy, this quarterback is a guy that we need to have on our team. And, T-Mac, I mean, he is one of the best athletes I have ever covered. And he, with really good volleyball player, was an all-state volleyball player in high school at Servite. Anything that he does, he is just so good at. And he's a really good wide receiver, and probably going to go down as the best wide receiver in Arizona football history. He's chasing Bobby Wade's all-time receiving yards record. He needs 1,248 yards to do it. And it's pretty awesome that Bobby Wade is now his wide receivers coach at Arizona. So Bobby Wade's like, hey, man, go break my record. Like, let's get this. And they are just amazing human beings. They are great men. They're also very talented football players at the same time. So, yeah, the leadership of Noah Fifita and T-Mac, Arizona fans, they're going to really embrace it this upcoming year, because it could be potentially the last year that these guys play at Arizona. It's certainly going to be T-Mac's last year, because he's going to be a first-round pick, but it could also be Noah's last year as well.
Off topic, but the sobering thing I took away from that is Arizona and UCLA not playing basketball head to head anymore. It's
yeah.
It reminds me of Bill Walton, the Conference of Champions, and it's just a bummer that those teams won't play head to head in the regular season like it used to be. One of the casualties of conference realignment, right? Really strange scheduling quirk with Arizona that stuck out to me. They played 10 Big 12 games this year, and Kansas State, I suspect it was a contract agreement beforehand. I mean, I'll let you explain it a bit more than I can, but they play them in a non-conference game before conference Big 12 play officially begins. So give us kind of a sense of how that all came to be, and then what other challenges do you expect Arizona potentially to encounter as they begin their first year as a Big 12 program?
Yeah, I think when Arizona scheduled Kansas State for a home and home series in 2016, I think they were envisioning that they were still going to be a Pac-12 team, and Kansas State is going to be the Big 12. This is going to be a non-conference game. You don't have to worry about that. But as we've seen over the last couple of years, things can change in a hurry in college athletics. And I think because it was just too soon to shuffle some things around, I think they were just like, you know what, let's just chalk it up as a non-conference game. Let's just do this home and home series and get it out of the way. That's kind of the weird things about college football is scheduling happens so far in advance. Like Arizona, they have a home and home series with Alabama in 2033 and 34. Like they're already scheduling games that far out. Maybe Kalen DeBoer is not the coach by that point. Maybe they've already gone through a couple of other coaches when they reach that home and home series with Bama. But yeah, so Kansas State and Arizona decided, hey, let's just keep the home and home series. Let's just keep it a non-conference game. But this is the official, unofficial introduction to the Big 12 for Arizona, because that is the first Big 12 opponent that they will face, even though it's considered a non-conference game. And that's going to be a huge test for Arizona, because Kansas State, if I'm not mistaken, they were voted to finish second in the conference. And,
Yeah.
they're going to be a top 20 team this year, and it's in Manhattan. They're going to get up because they know that Arizona is a really good opponent that's coming in. And it's going to be a big test for Arizona. And then right after that game, they got the Wildcats. I'm talking about the Arizona Wildcats. That's going to be another interesting thing. I've never had to cover a game where both mascots are the Wildcats.
Wildcats, yeah.
It's going to be Arizona, Kansas State, KSU versus U of A. No Wildcats will be mentioned in my game story. But right after that Kansas State game, they got to play Utah on the road in Salt Lake City. And that is the first official Big 12 game for Arizona. And Utah, they have sold out essentially every home game since 2015. They're going to be so much better this year because, they're going to be healthier. They're going to have their starting quarterback back in Cam Rising. They got some really nice pieces in the transfer portal, including former Arizona wide receiver Dorian Singer, who had an off year at USC last year. But Utah, that's going to be a really tough game. And, that's a team that's vying for a spot in the college football playoff. So Kansas State, Utah, and back-to-back weeks on the road, that to me is going to say a lot about this Arizona team and where they're at.
That is jumping into the deep end as far as the Big 12 is concerned. And I think overall, I'm curious to know what you think about a trip to Orlando, 2 time zones away. Kind of an interesting time in the schedule for them because there's a couple home games before UCF. They have a bye week after UCF. What's kind of your gut telling you about this first trip to Orlando for Arizona?
If there was ever a trap game, it's that one. Because I would imagine at that point of the season, Arizona will probably have 2 losses, but several wins, and they're feeling pretty good about themselves. But then you got that trip to Orlando, and that's the space game. And if there's anything that I've learned in my time covering college football, don't mess with the Central Florida Knights on their space game because they just kick it up a notch. I'm pretty sure you know this, Chris. They
Yeah.
beat their opponents by 40 points on space games. Like they just killed
Last
teams.
year against a 15th ranked Oklahoma State team that had the Doak Walker Award winner against a UCF defense that finished 122nd against the run. It was 45-3 UCF.
Yeah. So to me, Arizona knows the space game in Orlando, different time zones, that's going to be tough. And like you said, the different time zones can affect your internal body clocks. You're going all the way across the country. And unlike Tucson, Arizona, it's a little humid down there. It's a little
Yeah.
sticky, and you could feel it in the air. I've been to Orlando twice for a couple of weddings over the last couple of years, and even in December, that's when I went to Orlando. Both times was in December, and both times I could feel the stickiness. I could feel the humidity and feeling that Florida air. And UCF, they went what 5-7 last year,
6-7. Yeah.
or 6 and
6-6 in
7.
regular season, 6-7 overall.
Okay. And then they added KJ Jefferson, who's the Big 12
Mm-hmm.
newcomer of the year preseason. They got some really nice pieces on both lines. I think that the Central Florida Knights, they are one of my dark horses in the Big 12. I think that they are going to be a really good team. They're going to be much improved. I think Gus Malzahn is a great coach. And so, yeah, Central Florida, after, like you said, going 6-7 a year ago, having some success in that transfer portal, I look for the Central Florida Knights to turn some heads this year. And if Arizona is flying high going into that week, I look for Central Florida to get Arizona. I actually, in my season preview, I picked that game as one of the losses for Arizona. I think conceivably Arizona can go 9-3, and I have those 3 losses being against Kansas State, Utah, and also Central Florida. But if they're out of those 3 losses, if I think that Arizona has a chance to win, I like that road game against Kansas State. It's really early in the year. Both teams are, trying to figure out their identity, trying to figure out what works for them. And that's going to be a huge test for both teams. But later in the season, you already know what you got. And to me, I think that Central Florida, they're going to be really, really good. And I chalk that up as a loss for Arizona.
I've weighed in on each of these games after listening to the writers, that I've talked to throughout the series that I've been doing. A couple things stand out in this conversation. Arizona replacing almost its entire defensive line. That's a concern for me if I'm Arizona, because we know that UCF, if nothing else, they're going to run the football, and they're going to run the football a lot, and they're going to run the football with intention. They have 2 1,400-yard rushers in the backfield. They have KJ Jefferson, who's dynamic when the play breaks down. They've even the guys behind RJ Harvey and Penny Boone and Johnny Richardson and Miles Montgomery can pop off and take it to the house at any moment. As we've kind of alluded to as well, you called them the Central Florida Knights a couple times. That day they'll be the Citronauts, and I like to jokingly call them the Juggernauts on Space Games. They are 7-0 all time in Space Games. I don't know what it is either. There's nothing that, it's not a huge changeover except for the identity, right? But the last 2 games I've covered the team. This will be my 3rd season. They put 70 on Temple, and they put 45 and beat and ran Oklahoma State out of the building. And the other thing that you touched on was the weather. Last year in the Space Game, it was a rainy day, and Oklahoma State did not prepare for it. They didn't have equipment that was suitable to play in the rain, and they paid dearly for it. So Arizona has got to be prepared for any and all circumstances, from a travel, from a logistics, and just from a head-to-head matchup standpoint. I think it's going to be a really fun game, and I think Arizona is going to be one of the better teams in this league too. So I know UCF is going to be alive and ready for that game. I think it's going to be a great matchup, and I kind of have the Knights winning as well.
Another thing I do want to add is I'm taking a page from the former Arizona head coach Jed Fish. He had a mantra at Arizona, and it was "It's personal." That was his thing. It's personal. Everything is always personal. The Space Game is actually pretty personal, because if you look at like astronomy, the University of Arizona takes great pride in astronomy. We actually have at the U of A mirror lab that's located underneath the football stadium. And you look at all these Mars expeditions, and I think it was Osiris Rex or something like that satellite that went up there. Arizona takes pride in its astronomy program. So the fact that UCF, in the first year of this expanded 16-team Big 12 league, the fact that they're scheduling Arizona for the Space Game, I think is really cool. And then meanwhile, you got Houston over there. Like, come on, we got NASA. We're Houston. Like, what are we, chopped liver? So I would imagine that
you got
maybe
Purdue
in the future,
trying to get in this fight too.
Really,
they're in a different conference, but Purdue's laid claim to space as well. Everybody's trying to take over the galaxy between all these colleges. Before I let you go, Justin, tell us where we can find your work and where we can find you on social media.
Yeah, you can follow me on X, or the social media app formerly known as Twitter. You can follow me at Justin E Sports, and then you can find all of our coverage on Arizona football this season on Tucson.com.
And for Arizona UCF fans that are watching as well, I'm Chris Boyle, DBNJ on X, and you can find all of our work on news-journalonline.com. Justin, appreciate the conversation. Look forward to seeing you down here in Orlando.
Can't wait, Chris. You the man. Thank you.
Thank you.